Yeah.
Well, I would never.
The date is May 24th, 2022, and the time is now 4:38 p.m. Before we begin our board meeting today, I want to acknowledge the horrific shooting that happened today at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde Independent School District, where dozens were injured and many were killed. Schools should be safe haven for our children and our communities. We offer our sincere support and condolences to the Uvalde Independent School Board of Directors, their superintendent, Dr. Harrell, and the Robb Elementary School leadership, teachers, staff, students, and their families. I ask that we as a board keep our colleagues in Uvalde in our thoughts, and we'll just take a few moments for silent prayer. To ensure that we have a quorum present, I'm going to read out the names of the members of the executive committee, and if you're here, please say present. Richard Frapart, present. Colin Clark.
Present.
Don Davison. Cameron Johnson.
Present.
Ed Taryak. Andrew McEwing.
Present.
Val Melville. John McPherson.
Present.
James Stanton.
Present.
Michael Stack. John Becker.
Present.
Thank you. I note here that we have a quorum of the executive committee present, and I call to order this executive meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. Our first item of business is a community forum. Alex, do we have any community speakers signed up to speak today?
We do not, Richard.
Thank you. The next order of business is to consider and take action on the April 12, 2022 board meeting minutes, which were provided in the board pre-read material. Are there any questions from the board on the recommended minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 12, 2022 board meeting as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Carol. Second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Are there any votes against the motion? The motion is approved by unanimous vote. I'll next hand it over to Remy to focus on a new segment for our board meetings. It's called the Mission Moment. Remy?
Awesome, thanks Richard. Good evening everybody. I just want to say I'm substitute teaching for Yasmin, who's doing some important work in Austin, and so I get the opportunity to share a really exciting component of things we want to bring to the board with regards to where we see people taking opportunities to really live out our mission. And I get to share with you a video from a teacher who is a teacher, a master teacher who's just earned a designation, who receives the teacher incentive allotment. Just a quick reminder, that is like a performance reward that the top teachers across the state are able to earn due to their high performance in getting students to achieve at high levels on the state assessment. And so this is one of our master teachers who get to share about how the teaching incentive allotment is making a difference.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Gavis, and I'm a master teacher here at Uplift Infinity. I'm currently a math interventionist here. The last 4 years, I was a 5th grade teacher at Uplift Grant. Really big, that's a lot of money, and I've been able to save up for my first home. I've been saving and saving to be able to purchase my first home, to put that 20% down.
Hi, my name is Annette Shelley, and I am a kindergarten teacher at Uplift Grace Primary. I am a master designated teacher, and I have been a gen ed teacher in kindergarten for the past 7 years. The money from TIA has financially helped me stabilize my home situation, and as well as helping me stay in the classroom, being able to do what I love doing and not having to go outside the classroom to do that. It also helps me show my other teachers, my peers, my coworkers that doing what I do, they can do it too. So I'm helping them establish goals to get to where I am as well.
So hi, my name is Maria del Carmen Maciel.
I am at Uplift Grand Primary. I have been at Grand for 2 years now, but I've been with Uplift for 6 years, and I have a Master TIA designation. Oh wow, it impacted my life in a lot of ways. I was actually an administrator at this school, and now this year I transitioned into like more of a classroom role again, an intervention role. So, you know, definitely brought me back to being with kids and teaching kids. But I think the other thing, which was pretty big for me too, was, you know, imposter syndrome is a really big thing. And so often, you know, you get a lot of advice and a lot of coaching from everywhere, but I still always thought, you know, maybe I'm not doing enough, or I'm not good enough, or, you know, my kids deserve the best. And so I think, you know, with the designation, it was also just a little bit of validation of like, you're doing something right.
Hi, my name is Ann Lawrence. I am a master teacher at Uplift Williams Middle School. I have taught 7th grade science, and I'm currently teaching 8th grade science now. So I am striving to eventually buy my own home, and the TIA allotment has made big jumps in my ability to save for a down payment, which would have taken me many, many years as a single woman without it.
So I think that is super fantastic to see at a time where you hear a lot of news stories that teachers are leaving the
Hi, my
classroom.
name is Alyssa Gavis, and I'm
It would have been okay to hear it again. Hearing teachers leaving the classroom, but to see that we have teachers, our best teachers, staying around, and they're able to do the things that bring them joy in their lives due to being compensated over and beyond our own pay for performance system. So kudos to those teachers, and obviously our chief people officer and her team for leading the work around the teacher incentive program.
Get your
All right.
Remy, was this our second year of the teacher allotment, or was this, when did it start?
Is this like our full second year, Anne, I believe?
Yeah, so we were approved in the summer of 2020 based off of data in the 18-19 year. So it's the second full year that we've been approved to run the local designation system, but it dates back to 18-19.
right here.
I was like, hang on, sorry, I think I'm going the wrong way. Bear with me. Can you help me, Carrie? Sorry, back to the start.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah Bigham, Chief External Affairs Officer, and I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. I have to duck out after this because I have end-of-year stuff with my kids and my husband's traveling. Super awesome time. We are going to go through our enrollment recruiting update. I'm going to give you some marketing updates. I have a really thick update from our marketing firm that has all kinds of interesting data and clips, and I tabbed a few spots that you might want to look, and we'll just circulate this around as I talk. I'll start with you, Christina, just so you can start to see a deeper dive into our paid marketing efforts, because we do spend a pretty significant amount of dollars in the last few years to try to impact market awareness and increase our recruitment efforts. Click the next slide, so this is working. So re-enrollment, we're slowly creeping up. We've gone from 87% to 93% since February. Our marketing team has added an additional 4,000 first choice applications through a lot of different targeted efforts, and we'll go through some specific things that we see working in the last few months. And our combined enrollment, current plus new scholars, is over 89% toward our full house target, so up from 75%. So we're making, baby step incremental growth month over month towards our overall goal. And we are continuing to have a really concerted effort around enrollment, with Yasmin and Remy really engaging on the schools team to get them to really focus on specific action plans at the school level that we know drives re-enrollment, and then the central recruiting team working with our marketing team on boots on the ground and paid marketing advertising to generate leads for us to close. Next slide, please.
How do those numbers compare to pre-COVID?
They're low. Yeah, they're not the same. We haven't gotten above pre-COVID numbers yet. And Yasmin, as you all know, is in Austin today, and the commissioner was sharing that the state of Texas is down 20,000 fifth and sixth grade age students because there was a lag in new births 11, 12 years ago, I think is when we were in 6th grade. And so there's just a natural, not as many kids as we would expect from previous years. So path to our enrollment, we're still 2,700 kids off our full house number. Again, the full house number is the number that gives us cushion to get us through potential, attrition that will naturally happen over the year, but gets us nice and full at the start of the school year and gives us the ability to lose a few kids should that happen and have no-shows on the first day of school. So we're making, again, nice progress. We're still not there yet. We know we're in this through into August, maybe September. We're hoping not September, so we can shift our focus to the next school year. That's where we are as far as our current gap is 2,700 kids.
Where do you think the next push is? Is it going to be on continuing the re-enrollment, or do you think it's really going to
It's
come
both.
from
Luckily, right, those two teams sit in two different parts of our organization, so someone doesn't have to choose which one to focus on. So Lanisha's team, who works underneath the managing directors of schools, assistant superintendent of schools, they focus on the engagement side, which is all the enrollment work. So that's at the school level, and they're continuing to push that effort. And then the recruiters are continuing to drive. We're really focused on kindergarten, 6th, 9th, and then we have about 7 struggling schools that we're really zeroed in on that we know can make the most impact to the overall budget.
Deborah, do you have a break that gap between Dallas-Fort Worth, Grand Prairie?
Yeah, yes, we do. Off the top of my head, our biggest gap in Fort Worth is Ascend and Meridian. Elevate, we've made some really great traction there. We're looking really good, so we're shifting kind of our resources a little bit, not away from Elevate, but doubling down elsewhere. In Dallas, Pinnacle, Hampton, Wisdom, kind of our single standalone primary schools are the ones that we see struggling a little bit versus the full K-12 systems. So those are the areas that we're focused.
So more primary versus middle and high school, would you say?
It's a mixed bag, but we see the standalone K-5s definitely are a little bit harder to fill right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So our continued path forward is we're not letting the gas off of re-enrollment. We're continuously messaging parents. People are making phone calls, closing those gaps. We're pulling, so in instances where our schools have wait lists, we look at their addresses and zero in what's the next closest school, and the recruiter will call them and say, "Hi Rusty, I see you have a 6th grader and you're on this wait list. You're never going to get off this wait list. Let me tell you about this fantastic other school. We'd love for you to come visit." And we are making some movements there. Sometimes it's a harder sell. We have hired up 6 contract positions. We finally got those hired up where we have the biggest gaps. So we have extra boots on the ground in those areas, and those folks are hitting pre-K centers, grocery stores, or tabling at events. They're just out in the community meeting lots of people. A real bright light in this hiring is a parent at Uplift Ascend. She's a parent of 3 kids, and she is a dynamo recruiter for us and loves the school, sees the value, and she's Casey Williams, and she's fantastic. I don't know if you know her or not, but she is going above and beyond. We are targeting gaps or interest lists created with paid ads. So we did a little test with pre-K where we ran social and programmatic ads. Those are different types of social media ads, which directly got people to fill in their contact information. So we created lead sheets for all different pre-K centers, and then we had our recruiters call everyone and basically close them through the process. And we had about a 34% return rate on that, which we thought was pretty good. So we've gone ahead and put that strategy in place for kinder 6th, 9th, plus the struggling schools that I was mentioning. And we're seeing some nice lead generation. I have some numbers on that early in the next few slides. And I talked about school leader plans have really doubled down their efforts and have specific plans on how to close their enrollment gaps the last 4 or 5 weeks of school. This is the last week of school. But so we're reevaluate where we are now that we don't have kids inside schools. So I'll shift now to the paid marketing and recruitment efforts, which is really connected to what I just talked about. But for the last 4 or 5 years, we have invested heavily in marketing. We heard from Bain, we had a market gap of awareness for Uplift. We're right now finding out kind of where we are as far as percent of voice of brand awareness in the markets that we're in, and so hopefully we'll have that at the next board meeting to share with you all. On the PR side, we're second to KIP Foundation, KIP National, which is pretty darn good since they're a national organization. But on the marketing side, we need to find that out. So our marketing campaign spend is really targeted for 3 areas. One is just general brand awareness, so that people know who we are when a recruiter goes and says, hey, you know about Uplift Education? Hopefully they say yes, right? They've heard of us, and then that makes the conversation easier. So that's the first piece of our strategy. The second is around scholar recruitment. Again, really targeted ads through the demographics that we are seeking, and then we work with Ann's talent team on teacher recruitment. So you can kind of see, it's a kind of a bit of an eye chart there, but the spend across the fiscal year through various modes of media. Okay, next slide. So this is what I was sharing. This is a campaign that we started. We're just a couple of weeks in. So this is the conversion rate that we're seeing thus far. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, 54 leads in kinder, but 10 conversions of that. On our struggling schools, we have so far have had 187 leads, and we've converted about 46 of those. And some of those, it might be that they're left in a voicemail or we haven't completely closed. And the recruiting team continues to call someone until they say, no, I do not want to apply to your school, and then we'll take them off. But we are persistent in that way. And then you see the programmatic ads are ads that will show up on your social media feeds that look like something that you signed up for, but you didn't, right? It just goes into your news feed. The social media are just paid ads, and so programmatic drives into our website. And so far we've had about 59 leads from there, and we've had a pretty strong conversion rate of the leads that we're pulling off of there. So they get driven to our website or a landing page, so they either fill out, yes, I want more information, or they just go ahead and apply.
How would you define impression?
No, impression is just eyes on it. So, that's just marketing PR firms will be like, that's how many people saw your ad, right? And then you get that many people to click or do some sort of engagement, and then conversion is getting them further down the funnel. Any other questions about that?
Do you have an issue with summer months?
Yes, we do.
Do you know how much? Issue?
As far as kids not showing up,
Right.
I think it's about 10%. That's why we have the full house number. So we over-enroll kids in anticipation of the kids that aren't going to show up on the first day or first week of school. So I want to end on a high note. Yes. Cam.
I was just curious to know, and I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, but in terms of like typically customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, like what's the value of one kid? Versus what we're paying? Does it seem like $160 for a conversion doesn't seem that expensive, depending on what they're worth?
So that's a tricky number, and you'll see in that book, right? So this is where I know enough just to get myself into trouble, so I'll just say that. The cost of acquisition changes through social media buys based on how well you're performing. So you can see our cost was pretty low, but I was just talking to our senior director of marketing, and we want to get to a place where we can take, say, these lead campaigns that we're doing, and we spend $32,000, and how many leads did we get, and then divide that across that, so we can better plan and budget in the future, knowing that, I'm making this up, we need 6,000 applications, the next school year times, it costs us $75 an application to get. This is how much we need to spend. So we're getting closer to that number, we're not there yet.
Sorry, question. well, I think it'd be great to follow up separately on Cam's point, because the more targeted you are, if it's an empty spot otherwise, it's gonna,
Agreed.
if you're getting the right one, which I think where you're headed, if you're filling in an empty seat, that's always gonna be a good return, right?
Absolutely.
So, I think it's a really good point. For re-enrollment, what's the process like? Is it, like, could I do it through the app? Is it?
You can do it on your phone. So it's through Schoolment, which is
Yeah.
our application lottery system. And so in January, all of existing families will get an email saying it's time to re-enroll, click here. What happens is that when parents click here, they get confused and sometimes they reapply for a lottery spot. So there's a lot of cleaning up and work that we need to do with our families, which they usually do fairly quickly. And then it's a matter of continuously emailing, you haven't completed, because there's lots of documents they need to upload in order to be considered fully enrolled, immunizations, things like that. And so it's just a little bit of a process. And then for pre-K, we have to qualify pre-K kids. So in April is when we run the lottery for pre-K, and then there's a whole qualification process for universal, for free pre-K in the state of Texas through Uplift. And so you have to qualify under 107 income. If you're in the military, don't speak English, there's a whole slew of them. Any other questions about that? And then this past weekend, our recruitment team partnered with Ebony at Meridian, the school leader out there, for May Best. And it was a really great collaboration and I think a best practice. Her teachers spent 1 hour, one day, a couple weeks ago, and they flyered at different places, as did our recruiting team. Plus we put paid social media out there. They had 300 to 500 people show up last Saturday. They had all these fun activities. They think they've received around 30 new applications. They're still going through all of the leads that they've received. And there was great public awareness of the school. So they asked families to bring someone with them, and if they did, and there was a verified new person there, they were entered to win a bicycle, Six Flags tickets, or something else. So so they'll be, giving out those prizes at a later date. But it was really great public awareness and just great community building. I think it's just a great first step and a nice collaboration between schools and the central office recruiting team. Dinner and dialogue. Shifting gears. Any other questions about the marketing, enrollment, recruiting? We're not there yet. We continue to look at numbers daily, weekly, and then shift as we need to.
You think we're ahead of last year at
Yes.
this point? I mean, it sounds like we are.
We started to make some traction. We are like a few hundred ahead of last year as far as new applications. The trick is getting them converted, and now we get into this weird time, Richard, where, right, many families may have already made a choice, right? Where the further you get into summer, the harder it is to get people to convert over and say, yep, I want to go to your school now. I changed my mind from that other school. So the work just becomes a little bit harder the later we push into the year. Okay, dinner and dialogue. First, I want to thank Christina and Elena, I don't know if she's on, for chairing our amazing event. I think many of you were there and would agree. It was a fantastic dinner and dialogue, probably one of the best speakers and moderators that we've had. I thought they were really dynamic, and we raised, over $300,000, which is the most we've ever raised at dinner and dialogue. So, yay, Christina and Elena. So, the whole purpose of the event is twofold. One is to bring new people into the Uplift fold and build some awareness. And then also equally number one is to raise money for our Road to College and Career program that we all know isn't fully funded by the state and is a critical flagship program of Uplift. So it was fantastic. Here's a breakdown of how we raised the money as far as table sales and how much we raised during the event. Jessica Whiteman, who's our new Director of Development and worked at the Texas Women's Foundation, she personally was pretty impressed, comparatively speaking, to their luncheon. that our average gift was $250 in the room. And so she thought that was a real positive. We want to grow it next year. We'd love to get 400 people in a room and raise more money for our cause. And, it's a really unique event where it's less about being a gala and more intellectual, but we think we can deliver that kind of event and raise money. And if you have any feedback on it, we would love to hear it. And before, I don't have a slide on this, we have our investor luncheon on June 1st at the Pecan Room. And many of you, I think, have registered to attend. My ask of you is, if you could think of 1 to 2 people that you think should be introduced to Uplift, this is a great way to do that. You don't ask for money at this event. It's a kind of a state of the organization address. We're going to have a lovely panel of some of our school leaders sharing, about how the last couple of years has gone. And then we pose a question to the room to help us problem solve around something that we're grappling with. So it's an hour. You all know we stay within our time frames pretty strictly. It's just a really low-key way to just bring someone to the table. So just if you have someone in mind, just let me know so we can make sure they're on our guest list.
Two quick comments. First, on dinner dialogue, we need chairs or co-chairs for next year. And it could be, probably won't be someone on the development committee the way it was this year, but anyone on the board or people that you know, and broadening it, getting people that have a passion for our cause but maybe aren't on the board would be welcome. We definitely are trying to bring new people in, new contacts. So anybody has any ideas, please let Deborah or me know. And before she sneaks out, we're a little hesitant to say this because we don't have the signed paper, but she and Yasmin did get a $7.5 million gift in the last 2 weeks from the Hammond Foundation. Now, that all come in immediately. We get $2.5 million in the next fiscal year, and it's spread out over 4 years after that. But obviously a huge gift and a huge compliment to you and your co-worker,
For a great program.
And that's for Road to College.
Road to College and Career. It's expanding. Daniel and Remy have really been thinking about how can we meet the needs of our stop-out kids. And there was interest from the Hammond Foundation on standing up a new certified nursing assistant certification program for our kids who have stopped out of college and or our high school kids once they graduate who may not want to go directly into college. So it'll be a great test for us.
A great case study in development work because they weren't going to make a pitch, but just to stay in contact, and we're in the right place at the right time. And part of the issue we have with this is we really weren't budgeting that kind of money specifically for this, so it doesn't. We were trying to raise $10 million this year. That 7.5 doesn't get us there because there's some rearranging and some of it's several years out, but huge success.
Great.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'll have a good afternoon.
Jim, go ahead.
Good afternoon. So today on the next page, we're going to have to talk about 3 items. 2 are approvals, the amended budget for this year, the summer projects, and then 1 update. So if I look at the amended budget, this is our standard slide that we want to show you. Not much change since we brought the last amended budget in February. Enrollment we still have as read. Attendance, you can see the 95.1% line. We do know now for sure that there is a hold of harmless, and that means approximately $4 million more revenue for us. I have green on cash and liquidity because cash is going to be up year over year the way it looks right now in the cash forecast. And then I have green for amended expense budgets because we have some favorability in that area. These also are the 2 major graphs that we'd like to show you now. The yellow is the scale on the right side, so that's percent attendance. The blue line, enrollment, is on the left side of the scale. All things are typical for this time of year. Just reviewing the year again, the big bump in the middle of the year is coming back from Christmas, winter break and had more cold ed. Then the next bump down was winter storm. And then at the end where it tails off, it just always tails off. And that's a projection, but last couple of weeks, this is traditionally happens. The blue line, that's the normal course of action throughout the year. We build up as we continue to recruit for the first 5 weeks. Then after that, there's just attrition and kids leave. And that's why you have that steady slope down throughout the year. Nothing unusual here compared to prior years. So the first item on the proposed amended budget, because of what I told you about the increase in hold harmless, that we have a slight decline in private and local and federal revenues, but all in all, because we're up by $600,000. On the expense side, which is the next page, ask if you want any more detail, just ask me. But all in all, for over the last couple of months, we see some expense favorability, approximately $700,000. Less than another, the last 2 years, we had a lot of expense favorability at the end of the year because in the COVID setting, remote setting, we were like cutting off spending and pulling spending in because we knew the kids couldn't travel and one year they weren't at school. But this is still a good sign this time of year that we see some cost favorability that we can bring home. So net, what does this mean? On this page, if you go down, we've been using ESSER 3, additional ESSER to make up for some of the enrollment issues that we have. And because of the good news that I just talked about, instead of spending 14.5 this year, we're spending 12.5. That's what we expect. And that gives us a debt service coverage, which should enable us to maintain our credit rating moving forward, which will be important when we go to the bond market in the future for both the funding of new Luna and also we have some bond classes that are ready to be called because rates were lower. Now we just have to wait and see on those when they. We're watching rates as time goes on here. So we're going to ask for an improvement of this proposed amended budget at the end, but do you have any questions on this part of the presentation before I move on?
Jim, the ESSER funds run out in 25, is that right?
Yeah, we have 2 more school years left, and then 1 quarter of the third school year. So next year's 23, 24, and then the first quarter of 25.
Okay.
And
there's a house tutoring bill that has funds that may augment that in some way to support the tutoring to support our teachers. Is that right?
We'll see what. Yeah, this is the thing. This is not the thing. Is a lot of that's going to go through starting in next January when the legislature is in session. We do not know yet what they're giving us, if they're giving us anything more this year. Usually, this is an off year. There was no legislative session.
Right.
So we're going into it. We're still working on budget assumptions.
So is that something we want to support, Richard, I guess from a board, the augmentation of these teacher tutoring funds that bill is related to?
I don't think so, but I think that's usually we roll into that in the fall. Do more strategy on not what we're going to allocate for.
There's a bill coming through related to teacher tutoring, and so I didn't know if that's something that the board would want to weigh in on to support our teachers. We're using extra funds for that now, right, Remy?
Yes.
So they run out in 2 years. So what happens after that, I guess, how do we support that? Or do we as a board?
Now we're spending a lot of incremental dollars in supporting the students to get them, further up, have tutors and all that.
Right.
And I do know that, that there will be a cliff. And so the idea that there's state funding that's instead of coming from the federal government, coming from the state,
Right.
It will allow us to keep those programs in place long term.
Are we going to write support letters, or how do we, as board members, engage in that process?
The answer is we will hear from advocacy, et cetera. We'll figure out how to do that. We'll be following the leads with other charters. But you would think that all the schools are going to be trying to participate in that program.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Right.
I would just say, I envision we also will be a lot smarter after we do our examination of how well do some of those programs work and which programs should we continue to advocate for over others as well.
So the reason I bring it up, we were just with State Rep Nicole Collier today on the tour of Fort Worth, and so her point to us was making sure we measure what we're using the funds for now.
Yeah.
So we come to ask that we have some measurements for that ask based on performance.
Yeah, and we're super fortunate that we are working with Brown University and Commit to do our evaluation of a lot of our high impact tutoring programs. So.
Okay.
And I was just going to make a comment before we go through the vote on the finance update, that this presentation was made to the Finance Committee last week. They went much more in-depth into it so that we don't have to spend a lot of time here. So just know that there were probably 4 or 5, 6 board members that were in attendance to that meeting. We spent a whole hour in this area, so we did a much deeper dive. And that's really the way a lot of our committees work. That by the time we get to the board, you've already got a representative group who's heard the presentation, asked a lot of the questions, so that when we get here, you really see a higher level, oversight. So, with that, if there's no other questions, do I hear a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 amended budget as presented? Thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, but who was that one? Okay, so I love your passion, but we actually need a member of the executive committee.
So moved. There you go, John.
Second.
That's something we always have to work on, because it's not always clear. So,
I've said that many times.
Just keep going.
That's a good.
Are there any votes against the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved by unanimous vote. And we'll be re-presenting this budget again.
Yeah, it's part of being a quasi-government organization. We actually get evaluated based on how close we come to our final budget meeting our actuals, but we actually can do it after the year end. They allow you to, so we amended in August or September when we see the numbers, but we try to do that in an executive committee meeting so we don't bore you with, that's kind of a last minute thing, and it helps us with our charter school ratings. But hopefully it's close at this stage of the game. Okay, so on New Luna, if we just turn the page, and this is kind of level set. So instead of reading it, instead of me reading it out, we can take a look at it now. That for the newer members to fully understand what New Luna is. That we've been working on this project since right before COVID hit, and I think in the let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th line, the prospective buyer actually started with us. And we heard about him in January of 2020. And I think it was January of 20. And then, 3 months later, we were in isolation. So, but that gave us the idea to pursue this type of project. And we're at the point now, if we turn the page. Does anybody have any? Yeah. So it's a big project because New Luna replaces 2 of our schools. It replaces the existing Luna Middle and High School. That's in Deep Ellum. It also replaces our Luna Elementary School, primary school. That's in downtown. So this school replaces two existing schools. It's on par. These are the what I compare them to: Wisdom, Ascend, and Elevate are our 3 largest projects that we ever did. And they were all done between 2018 and completed in 2024. Slightly more sections than Wisdom because we're building primary out to be a 4-section school instead of 3 for Wisdom. And slightly smaller than Ascend and Elevate because Ascend and Elevate do not have a feeder school. New Luna has White Rock, which is actually in a very good position compared to where New Luna's going. And New Luna, for those that don't know, it's at the intersection of I-30 and Bruckner Boulevard. So east side borders Mesquite. Like right, if you walk, it's almost our property line. And it's right along I-30, which gives us an inbound path. So square footage, you can see it's in the neighborhood. Now, the one thing that's different is the cost line. You see that right now, construction costs are estimated, and land purchase costs are estimated to be $68 million. And that's somewhat higher than the actual, much higher than the actual cost. We usually have some favorability in past years. So what's going on? It reflects a couple things. Land has been expensive in that location, probably all in. Land is going to be close to $7 million. On these other projects, land was probably in between the $1 to $2 million range. The other thing that we have going on here is we have normal cost increases over the years 2018 through 21, and then really spiked increases this year. In fact, I just, 2 weeks ago, with PMSI, went up from 62 to 68 million total project costs. So that's just the environment that we're in right now with steel and construction costs. So that's where we are today. So you go, next page would be, how are we going to fund this? So you have 68 million as the first line. The second line is, hey, if we're going to sell Luna secondary, we heard and we were thinking 25 million back in the beginning of 2020. Since there's a lot of water under the bridge, we still think there's demand, and we are going to have a comprehensive marketing process start hopefully in a couple months. Once we have to buy a little sliver of land yet, we want to close on that land before we start to market the sale of the original Luna. It's going to follow state requirements for bidding. It's going to be a sealed bid process, and we're going to do a local and a regional and a national type of search for potential buyers. So just for us here in the room, and whoever reads this presentation, we're thinking it's going to be a range between 20 and 30 million dollars. So that comes off of the top of the 68 million. We do need to discuss with the Luna primary people, the landlord on Luna primary, to get that lease goes on for several more years. So there's going to be a negotiation process. On one hand, we feel good that there's some development going on across the street, like between the aquarium and Woodall Rogers, that there's something being planned there that might enhance our value. But hopefully this is a school that's our school on the first floor and a 6-story parking lot above it. So that process starts soon. And then also, a couple pages ago, I showed you how a lot of these bigger projects had some savings in them, but we raised the bond money. In effect, we raised too much bond money. So that's what this 14 million is. We have 14 million of unused bond funds from previous projects that we can put to work here. And so, right now we're looking at additional money between 24 million and 36 million, depending on basically the sale price and the buyout of the lease. So how do we fund it? Next week, knock on wood, we're going to close on renewing our $50 million line of credit for capital projects. That's tied to the bond master indenture. That's a floating rate loan. We have 50 million. We can watch the market and decide with this 50 million when we want to take it out with fixed interest coupon bonds. So sometime it's a three-year line of credit, $50 million. We'll start to draw on that once we begin construction. Pay off. We already have spent money on the land. We spent money on engineering and design, And actually, we spent some money on procuring some steel recently. So funding's in place after get this line renewed next week on a floating rate line of credit, and then ultimately go to the market and fund a bond to pay down this line of credit that we're going to use. Any questions on this? Okay. The next thing, summer projects. Again, wanted to tell you, this is like, why are we doing this? So we do projects every summer. Usually at this time of year, we used to have a bond deal going on, so we would just package it as part of the bond deal and talk to you about all the projects. All these expenses are capital expenses that aren't in our operating budget. We need to have your approval to spend this money in capital, because we didn't bring it to you last year because we didn't know what we would do for this year or not. This goes through how we set this up and who we talk to and who oversees. There's a committee on the board chaired with Cameron, and then there's members of the E-team that are on the board. We bring in people, depending on what we're talking about, from architectural to, that the board is now working with the people who are going to be involved in the process of selling Luna. So every year we have these summer projects, if we turn the page. And so the first, all the named projects here are managed by PMSI. Those are that's our group that manages our major construction processes. And then they also do what we consider substantial capital-related projects, updates on our schools. For example, the Summit Bridge is a big amount. It's a big walking bridge. We were supposed to, it took a couple of years to get this fabricated. It was originally part of an 18 project, and we're finally putting the bridge in. It's an important bridge that connects different parts of our campus, and it's even more important because the communication cables from the outside world come in over that bridge. And the old bridge was about ready to fall in the river. And so that's the biggest project we're working on. We're also, Heights is one of the bigger projects because we're doing a lot to compete with the new DISD middle school, high school that's a couple blocks away. So there's some things that we're kind of sprucing up, giving them scoreboard bleachers, putting in the outside basketball court where they can play during breaks, etc. And then we have other projects at Meridian, Mighty, and Atlas, smaller projects nonetheless, and even PMSI is helping us do the last thing we need to do at Elevate, to put in a crosswalk with curb and ramps. That was an agreement with the city. We knew about it 4 years ago. Now that's the last thing we need to do for this project. The all other line represents the work that school people to complete, all the people in facilities. They go around, there's a whole process that we talked about on the prior page. It's almost a year-long process where everybody gives their wish list on what they want done, and different people from different parts of the school kind of have the funnel, narrowed it down. So there's, 20, 30 projects in all other campuses. The $210,000, because only represents the capital assets, capital expense, not the operating expense, because the operating expense for these type of projects, we just put in our yearly operating budget. Like a lot of the operating costs are maintenance items. You're going to, you need to put sealer on a parking lot. You need to replace X amount of air conditioners a year, or repair. And if they're small enough, air conditioner can be either capital or operating, depends on the cost. And hot water heaters, a lot of these, but those would all be operating expense, and you approve that in the operating budget. So this 210,000 is just the capital items, the larger items that they need to do to, get the schools in order. So the total is, for this year, is 2.4 million approximately.
And it's really relatively a small number
Small
when you
amount,
think
yeah.
about the total capital expenditure we have in buildings and improvements. I think we have clearly over $500 million.
Yeah, we have debt of over 400 million and assets of close to 500 million. And, our depreciation is like 15 million a year.
Again, this also went through the finance committee last week for discussion and approval, for discussion.
Richard, question, couple questions. I'm assuming that the mighty line means gym, lobby, library. That's two projects? Gym, lobby, library renovation? Should that be gym, lobby, and library renovation? That's a question. Cameron?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the same,
Is that-
same area, different.
So the lot, okay. Gym, lobby, library renovation?
Wow.
That mean the gym, lobby, and library renovation?
Well, I'm thinking that maybe they captured it that way. I'm sure they're two separate projects, but my
Okay.
guess is they captured it as one because they're
Yeah,
going to do.
and, okay, gotcha.
That's
I'm
my speculation on it.
okay.
Went over today.
Alex, can you hear me? Alex, it's Jasmine. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
Yasmin.
Yes.
Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear us?
The mighty projects are the library, which we are converting some of the back space in the library to additional classroom and small group instruction space. And then it's the lobby, Andre, of the cafeteria gymnasium building. We are carving out some of that space, which if you recall is quite large, for additional classroom space and open space. So it's not the main lobby of the primary or secondary building, it's the lobby of the cafeteria / gymnasium building.
Okay, thank you on that. And then question maybe.
You're welcome.
Cameron, for the committee, operational equity. So did you look at the similarity? Do we have a template for all of our campuses across the network and how they look to ensure equity, operational equity in
Yes,
usage?
this has been in place since I've been here, so probably 5 or 6 years.
Right.
Where there's a parity chart across the different schools, because what you run into is you ask for a new gym floor, and you get one, and I didn't get one.
Right.
And so there's a chart that across all the campuses to try to keep everyone in parity. And so there's not this idea of this campus is getting more favor versus this campus. And so you're constantly trying to keep balance each summer and track who got what and who needs what and what's most pressing. Most pressing being, can the place operate, right? There's must-haves, nice-to-haves, and needs-to-haves.
Okay. Is there a chart that the board can see that this is one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we have. We can certainly get it to the board.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, newer board members,
Yeah.
been on here 10 years, I want to just, operational equity to everything you just said, Karen, to ensure equity across the network.
No, we can definitely get it out to the board. Maybe what might even make more sense is we can even have a portion of the board meeting kind of reviewing how we actually do that work.
Sure.
So how the parity actually works.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the end of my presentation.
If there are no other questions, do I have a motion to approve the summer 2022 capital projects as presented?
So
Thank you, Kenny. Second?
Rich, got a question on that.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Yeah, the timeline on how, when that 2.3 million, of when that
Over the
gets,
summer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
all of it
starting.
done to summer?
All these, we have to do these. There are existing schools on the
Right.
existing schools, we have to get them done during the summer, so they're all.
So there's any summer program disruption?
Basically summer school, we limit it to certain, you can't go on these campuses.
And how would that replacement of that program, how does that work? You can't have it.
Wow.
What do we have?
Okay, so I can give you one example. One of the things we're doing this year is we have a high school program. And the high school programs, there's also maintenance issues too, and they plan out maintenance. And so they decided they decided to, best thing to do is have all summer school programs at 4 or 5 campuses that are K through 5 campuses, because a lot of these are K through 12.
Right.
So all these programs are on the K through 5, and then we just got through today. If anything is over 7 miles or so, transportation-wise, we're going to provide bus service for the high school kids to get to the campuses.
Okay. So Remy, has this been communicated?
Yeah, so for this latter development
Right.
has not, because literally it's in the making,
Okay.
in conversation.
Well, summer school starts next month?
Yeah, so the locations have already been determined and communicated out
Right.
to people.
Right.
And so this is usually the week, so really the program that's probably most impacted is our high school end of course assessment remediation, the required by the state. It's probably because it starts the soonest. And so this transportation issue
Right.
is really impacting probably the high school students more
Right.
than anybody else.
Right.
And so that is the issue that the team is working around right now. As we contacted parents, and parents have said, I would love for my kid to come, however, because we just got the results within the last week or so. They may have a transportation issue, and so we're going to call back each and every one of those families and say, great, wonderful, show up at the school, we'll make sure that you get to, the new location. So,
Just sensitive to learning, trying to catch up, given we lost a lot.
Oh,
That's the only reason.
Oh.
Okay.
it is a number one priority.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I think we had a motion.
Yes, we had, Cam had the motion.
Is there a
We
second?
have a second? Second.
Thank you, John. Are there any votes against the motion? If not, I'll note that the motion is approved by unanimous vote. Thank you, Jim. Next, we're going to hand it to Remy again to give us an update on the DEI strategy and the board's commitment.
So, go ahead, I guess the next slide. So, you guys can go back, Jim talked about 2020. We go back to 2020 when the board made the commitments with regards to prioritizing equity for our organization. And we have been able to continue moving since that point, really thinking about how we ensure that equity is integrated in all of our work. And so 2 things I'll highlight on this slide that I'm super excited about. I'm trying not to steal my lead here. The first is around, we realize as we continue to reflect as a senior level team, that we are really effective at educating many children, but we can't consider ourselves as high achieving if every student in our network is not able to be at or above college ready or grade level proficiency. And so what we have really decided to commit to over forever, for as long as we're in business, is to ensure that we don't have these performance gaps or opportunity gaps between our scholar groups. And so I'll talk about that and our goals as we move forward. The second part was really making equity, having an equity vision for our whole organization and creating a vision statement in which we felt very comfortable moving forward and ensuring that we call attention to equity being the priority for our network. And so if we go ahead to the next slide. This is our network vision statement. So how it came to be is we sat down and talked about what are going to be our priorities for the next year. And we actually took a meaningful pause. We usually fast forward ahead. We come up with the priorities in a couple of months and we're done. But we realized that in order to really talk about closing performance gaps, we needed to take a step back and say, what are we actually trying to accomplish as a network team? And so several iterations and several conversations, we came up with this network vision statement, and I'll just read it aloud for us today. Our communities choose Uplift for being a high-achieving IB network of schools that ensures that our scholars thrive as individuals, take pride in their own and other cultures, and are critical thinkers prepared for college and career. We wanted to highlight, yes, we can be high achieving, but we also are a network where we want students to feel comfortable being themselves as they come to school each and every day to get prepared for college and career. On the next slide, this talks about the goals that we've established that are aligned with the vision that we created. So thinking about, we want our students to be high achieving, we want them to thrive, be their authentic selves, and be prepared for college. That means our goals have to mirror that. So you'll see that first goal around academic achievement. Usually we'll put a number, like in our 5-year board goals, we have like a meets master's number for all students or a certain subset of students. But we thought it was important that we think about how do we get every single student to 70% of our students on our state assessment scoring meets or masters, meaning they're at or above grade level. And like, how do we actively activate our teachers and leaders to ensure that they're prioritizing every single scholar group when they're thinking about academic achievement. Our second goal around scholar culture is that ensuring that, and this is a lot of work that's being driven by our well-being team, that our scholars have opportunities to feel valued, respected, challenged, and learn to grow. Meaning we're going to seek out information from them to say, hey, how are you feeling? What is your experience like as an Uplift scholar here? So we can continue to hear their voice to kind of shape our culture moving forward. With our staff culture, we have been really fortunate to have used Gallup Q12 to really keep a pulse on our engagement for our staff, for our faculty. And so we want to make sure that as we've learned about Gallup over the last several years, we realize there's just some basic hierarchy of needs that we need to meet for our teachers, and making sure they know what's expected of them and they have the resources they need to do their jobs. And so we want to keep a pulse on, are we actually living up to that basic expectation? Because we're good at a lot of the other things. Caring, you'll see it's off the charts for our teachers and our leaders in our network. But in the area we realized we needed to shore up on was making sure people have what they need to be successful. And then our last goal is around college and career. We've always had a goal around 70% of our scholars graduating from college within 6 years. And so that means that before they leave our high schools, they have to be college and career ready. And so we have set these goals, and we realize we can't achieve these goals on the first next year. Yeah, and I get to talk to you guys about all the academic data next month. But we wanted to talk about where do we want to be 3 years from now and backwards plan. What are nice incremental growth that we can see over the next several years as we progress toward making this a reality for our network. I'll go on to the next one.
Remy, got a question.
Why aren't Caucasian kids held to the same 70% of, you say, Black, Latino, Latinx, etc.? Why just them?
Yeah, so when you look at our data, our Asian and white scholars probably perform at or above that level already. And so when we'll get an opportunity to look through some of our academic data, when we come up next month, you'll see a huge gap in terms of performance between our Black, Latinx, our emerging bilingual scholars, and our Asian and white scholars. So 70, and I can't speak for every single grade level subject area, but it is a huge gap. But we would have a goal for every single scholar group, as we progress and monitor throughout the year.
But if there were some students that didn't, would they be held to
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're given whatever they need to succeed as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Remy, along that same line, you referenced the 70, we always use 70%. Where does that number come from?
Yeah, so I think when thinking about the predominant scholar groups that we serve, the graduation rate currently is about 10 to 13%. Now we are at about 50 as a network in terms of students who graduate with a college degree within 6 years. So it is just setting a higher bar than where we currently are in our 50, to taking it up to 70. But that 70 has always been our goal, but that is more than 5 times the national average for the scholar groups that we serve.
I mean, the first box represents what percentage of our total students? That group of students?
Probably in the 90+% range.
Yeah, again, being a white person, we're going to have to be careful, I guess, but it strikes me as unnecessarily ignoring 10% of our students, the way this comes across. And I've seen the data enough, I understand what we're trying to address, but is there a way not to exclude anything?
Can we just say 70% of all students?
Yes, for sure. But understand, we can say 70% of all students, but it may feel a little artificial, right, to an Asian scholar population. So when we roll out the goals, and I show you like the 3-year, you won't see this today, but I commit to doing that in June, you will see where our scholar groups have started. And the goal is to make sure the gap closes, but we're not going to shrink them down to 70%, right? So like, if the Asian, I'm just gonna pick a number, we could see on right now, if we look at a 5th grade STAR assessment for our Asian scholars, they might be at 86% meet, right? And so like, they've already super exceeded the goal. It doesn't mean that we won't give them a 90% goal, like over time, but everyone's goal will go up to move obviously the network average up. Before 70% they've hit it. We can definitely think about putting it all there, but I think it's just we have to be careful that we don't call out that we have performance gaps. So I think that's the thing we want to make sure we point out, that we do have gaps in our performance between scholars.
I think that piece is what everybody's kind of picking up is missing. So like literally, if you just added on to that, like, you know, tracking toward equity within the whole scholar population, because I get what you're saying is like, it is artificial to say, well, we want to get, you know, Caucasian and Asian students to meet 70%. Well, they already are. So it's really about, I think this goal is really about driving equity, and that's kind of how you set this up. But given the political situation and everything that's happening in current events, I think if an outsider picks up on this, you know, happens on this board meeting and, you know, views it, we may be opening ourselves up to unnecessary kind of feedback because they're feeling left out, or that it doesn't specifically address that gap. So I think it's just a matter of language, not necessarily changing what you're doing, but kind of really connecting those two things intrinsically in the stated goal.
Andre's first. And I'm struggling on the scholar culture, same type of thought process. I'm thinking 100% of primary and secondary school scholars feel valued, not 90 and 70. So I'm struggling with why 90 and 70 don't feel valued versus 100%.
So the reality, like Andre, is that on the current survey that we use to measure, we switch platforms over to Rhythm. You'll notice that we'll just do sense of belonging, which is where this is calculated. Primary students typically have a very high sense of belonging. They're probably in the 70s to 80% on surveys currently, right now. In high school and secondary, you will see belonging and all those things go the other way, where they're in the 30s to 40% range. And so, one, we've got to set realistic goals for our teams in terms of where we are today, and making sure that they are achievable, right? Because we get the feedback from our leaders, and we're like, oh, 100%, and they're like, we're at like 40% on something. Like, how am I going to get there? And so I think it is, you know, we're just trying to set an achievable goal, and the reason why it's differentiated between the scholar groups is honestly just because of where we are. But I think we could take the feedback to put them to 100, but I don't want to, I mean, I think
I want all our scholars to feel valued.
Absolutely,
absolutely. That's just what
we do too, right? I mean, we absolutely do.
And not delineate
For sure.
20%, so go ahead.
No, I just want to say I'm white, and all 4 of my children are white, and they're all Uplift North Hill scholars, and we're proud to be Uplift North Hill scholars, and they are minorities at their school, and their mother and I are thankful for that. I think John's point is well taken. I think we need to be careful with our language. I don't think we want to repel people because they don't fit into a certain group, or certain people only need to do certain things or whatever. There's a reason why their mother and I vote with our children as to where they go to school and who they go to school with. And so I think John's point's well taken. I think we need to watch our language.
Okay.
Overall, on everything.
Part of this is how are we going to use this, I think is maybe the most important question.
Right, from an advocacy perspective, how are we seen?
We need to be
Correct.
super sensitive. If we're using it internally, where you get a chance to have this kind of conversation, there's this kind of understanding. And again, I've looked at this underlying data now for the last 7 or 8 years to understand the gap that needs to be addressed. But and again, I'm not sure, maybe you explain, what are we going to do with these 4 visions?
I can share, excuse me, I can share you with that. I can share that with you, excuse me. One, this is how we set our strategies with our school leaders and our teachers. So it is an internal facing like, like usually when I say, what are we gonna do next year based off of the data we have this year, this is how we we set our strategy for the upcoming year with our teachers and our leaders within our network. That's where these are the goals we will use to monitor progress, over the course of the school year. So it is driving the internal work of our teachers. So for instance, what we will do now, right, we have to do a better job of is actually monitoring these specific scholar groups, right? Because oftentimes, like, people can look at the whole aggregate data set and be like, oh, my students are 50% means I might be doing okay, right? But really, or 80%, but they may not take the time, right? We have to build in our practice is to look at different scholar groups in terms of how they're performing. And that's really what we want to drive the work of our leaders, to take a closer eye at all scholar groups, like who is doing well, who is this curriculum or this particular instructional strategy working for? And if it's not working for a certain group, are they in the high impact tutoring group? Are they getting that additional support? So it's really shifting our leader focus to get a little bit more into the details around, are we serving all of the scholars at your campus? It's really the thought behind this particular goal. So it's more internal facing for our school leaders and teachers to make sure that they're having a close eye on our teachers.
That's not.
Well,
That's not the right explanation. But I mean, we need to focus on all the scholars, which I think is John's point.
Let me just say this.
I'm done with my question.
Let me say this in super. I think there's been some viewpoint from the board that needs to be considered, and I suspect that we can come back and meeting and update it. From my memory, if you look at it from the past, the academic achievement in the past was we were going to have this goal for all of our students. Then when we peeled back the banana and we said, what's going on here, we realized that while we were achieving the goal, we weren't necessarily achieving it across all students. So hopefully maybe this came up. Really no different, and it's the same analogy. But we've had this scenario where we look at Uplift as a total network, but then we never really spent time to say, well, what's going on in Dallas versus Fort Worth, and are we getting the same outcomes? And all of a sudden we had groups in Fort Worth and their donor group who wanted to know how their dollars were impacted, and we started spending time there. I suspect from this conversation, we'll make the change where everybody's included, and the goal of it is really the same. We want all groups to be at a certain level, period.
I mean, I think it's good to understand the granularity of an issue like this, but when you use words like goals and vision and mission, and you don't say we set high standards for all of our scholars, that's an issue.
Well, and here's the bigger issue. If we're going to set our network goals to all of this, each of us knows that each of the Uplift schools is different because of the community that the school goes into. So the Black community at each of the Uplift campuses is very different. The Latino, Latinx community at each of the Uplift schools is different. Based on where each of those campuses exists. And so these network goals where we're going to slice and dice folks based on these things, I think is concerning. I think it ought to be an overall, I just think we have an overall goal as a board that each child is completely capable of doing anything he or she wants to do based on the experience. And so,
Richard, is Yasmin on?
Yes.
And she's,
Can I just add something?
Sure.
I mean, what I want to say is, if the language of the goal makes people feel as if we're not ensuring that every student is successful, I could take that critique and totally understand it and note it, and we will go back to the drawing board about that. Yes. I think that what I do want to say is that regardless of what school you're at, and I want to make sure that every kid in that school gets the education that they deserve. And what often happens, especially when you're at a higher performing school, some of the aggregate data mask challenges that you have in different scholar groups. And I want to make sure that those students aren't overlooked, their needs are not overlooked, and that is what that goal is trying to get at. And so we can work on the language, but I just want to make sure that I don't want anyone to walk away from the meeting thinking, oh, we're picking these students. That is not the intention behind the goal. It is to just make sure that every student gets what they need. And so I think that we can take the feedback on the wording and come back, next month with it. But I hope that we can all agree on that intention.
I do believe that one thing that would be a great help to everyone who sits on this board is to go to the Texas Education Association school report card site and take a look at some other school report cards so you can understand the data that Remy is talking about. When you go and look at a school district report card, you will see that the data comes across as, first of all, an overall goal that is set for the school, and then it is separated into demographics. Okay, so then, while we might say we want all students to achieve 70%, it is then broken down into ethnic categories. And then not only is it broken down into ethnic categories, it's broken down into male and female. Then it's broken down into special ed. And then it's broken down into whether or not they have, whether or not they're low poverty. So all of those things are taken into consideration when the school rating is given. So all of those things are considered when it comes to the school rating. So it is important that we do kind of have those things outlined in what she's saying. We can change the language, and the language can be as simple as all third graders will meet this goal, or all fifth graders will meet this goal, so that it is more generic when it comes to something that is presented overall. But we do have to have that kind of data. It has to be there.
But I want to say, Remy, and definitely agree with all the comments. After 10 years, I've never seen us delineate this deep that way. I guess that's what personally I'm struggling with after 10 years. But I've never seen it to this extent of percentages. We had an overall goal. Then we took that, we drilled down into the demographics based on the school.
Yeah.
But I think, for me, after 10 years, I'm just struggling with.
Yeah, and I know we're going to go to the rest of
so
your
just
second, but
wanna
understand how you get beyond, so what happens, just for the data perspective, how to get beyond an overall network level, 40% meets masters, right, in terms of students being college ready, Q4 or 5 on math. What's happening is you got a high end, and then you have others who are performing underneath that. And so we can keep pushing, the top end, but we've got to figure out what's happening in all other scholars groups. And so I think it is, how do we make sure we have a practice that we're able to consistently do that? And again, the goal can be a big goal, but we have to make sure that we are giving attention to all scholars groups. That's why you see the getting brain.
I think everyone.
Last comment.
Yeah.
Last comment. Let's move on. Thank you.
Well, and Richard, it's Jasmine. Can I then please chime in for just a second to remind the board of something after you make your comment?
Oh, good, okay. So one suggestion on that first one is you can say the overall goal for all schools, all students is, and then each category also needs to meet, and that would, I think, cover that. I wanted to address Andre's comment about the scholar culture. How about as measured by? Can you describe what tool you're using to measure those things? Because that will help calibrate that it's, because you're right, the overall goal is 100%, but you're using tools, you're measuring these outcomes. If you articulate that, that might make it more appropriate.
Okay, Yasmin.
Great, and I'm so sorry. I know this is so hard with me, my phone. I just want to remind the board that right before the pandemic, as part of House Bill 3, you all were required to approve 5 grade level, 5 subject, 5 student group goals in order to close the gap between student groups. It actually was a legislative requirement of every public school board in Texas. So we brought pages of goals of saying how over 5 years, and then the pandemic hit, we would shrink the gap in student group performance. So I hear all the feedback, and we can make sure that public-facing goals are broad, but I just want to remind us, we actually have goals we had to submit to the state, approved by the board, to say how every student group would perform over 5 years by every grade and subject level, and then we can continue to make sure the strategies we use to reach our English language learners or our special ed students are specific to help reach those goals. But I just did want to remind folks, because it's been a couple of years, that that was a requirement of House Bill 3.
And also just, I want to tack on to that, is if we go back to 2020 in the social justice call to action that this board drafted the resolution around, is that these are exactly the things that we identified that we wanted to know. And what we saw in the Bain study is that there are huge gaps in these groups. So we have a very small white population, but they are overperforming all of our diverse categories. So I think that Remy and the team took that from this board and are addressing it here today. I think what we're getting caught up on, like we said, and I think that if I had to summarize this, it's all about language. And this is something we're seeing broadly. When we think about the difference between equity and equality, this is about equity. So when we talk about everybody has the opportunity, yes, we provide all scholars the opportunity to rise and the opportunity to make their own futures. But when we look at equity across these groups, there is something about the color of your skin, whether or not you speak English fluently, if you have special education needs that are preventing. There are systemic barriers that prevent these students from being able to reach the full potential that their partners and their other peer scholars are being able to do. So I think that Remy and her team are really looking at those pieces, and I appreciate that, because it is about breaking down systemic barriers that are not just on an Uplift campus either. They're societal. There are things that we're doing there. So I would say kudos to Remy. I think that what we've identified is that there is a language need here. And one thing I would say to you, Remy, too, and your team, is that I understand that this is internal, but everything that we do in the school system is external. So, when we talk about this is a publicly recorded meeting. This is something that anybody can access. When you go and talk to scholars and to teachers, I think there's an internal education lingo that is kind of, I would say, colloquial, right? Like you all in education understand these terms, you get it. But I think on anything that you're going to write down, that there needs to be a longer explanation, because that piece of paper, this presentation, can go out to anywhere in the media, in the public, and elicit a reaction that is not necessarily what you meant, because you're speaking kind of in a tongue that is more specific to the profession. So if I had to, that's my big summary of this whole conversation. So hopefully maybe that helps. I don't know, but I just wanted to say thank you to Remy as well, because I think this is specifically the work that her team should be doing, in addition to addressing all scholar needs.
Thank you, Ricky. And I think it's the entire E team has worked really hard into trying to live out the board's commitment, and just to continue to iterate and build out our equity plans. So I'll go really quickly over the next couple of slides. I know we're probably short on time. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And I'll just do a quick highlight that this was an equity vision statement, which I think that we have definitely been living up to in terms of what do we mean by equity. We needed to make that clear to our teachers and leaders within the network. And so you'll see in the statement, it is around making sure that we identify and address and correct existing and potential inequities is really what we're after. And so what I like about these 4 boxes below tell you how we do that. One I'll just highlight is around engaging, something that many of us, the entire executive team and our managing directors, actually went out and met with every single school to hear from our scholars and their advisory around, what their interests are, what are things that they want, so we can actually hear from that. We continue to have many, many open forums for people to engage with not only senior leadership. Something we'll be doing more often is making sure that more of our senior leaders do more of that, to make sure that we are addressing the needs of our scholars and families, and we get to hear from them directly. And so those 4 boxes below kind of talk through what are the actual actions we're taking to make our vision come to life. These are a few of the commitments that we have been able to live up to with our scholars throughout this year. And that is just ensuring that, we are thoughtful about the curriculum we put in front of our students and they see themselves reflected and learn the cultures of other students, of other people. We will continue to, we're led by our well-being team, reimagining our scholar code of conduct. How do we handle when we have, scholar disruptions and things of that sort in a way that is restorative for students. And then the last one is around our athletic programs. We often get critiques that we don't have strong athletics, so we're putting more time and energy around building up those programs just to increase the scholar experience, but also student belonging, because that's something that they really want. On the next slide, it highlights some of the things that we've done with our staff. And so you'll see that we have been intentional about the diversity of our overall staff and our leadership and teaching teams on our campuses. And we've done a few other things with our affinity groups and ensuring that we are providing our teachers, providing our scholars high quality tier 1 instruction. So you'll probably hear that a lot. I wanted to say that word just because I'll talk about that when we start talking about next year around what do we make sure that the first time we're with our students, they have the best instruction, whole group instruction is what we really want to get after for the upcoming year. And then on the next slide, it shares how we have been upholding our commitments with our families and with our community. And so you saw that wonderful event the recruitment team had at Uplift Meridian, but we're continuing to make sure that we get our family voice. We do monthly surveys and POSIP so our families can say what their experience has been and what their needs are, and review and respond to that data frequently, and continuing to just make sure we have vendor diversity as well as part of our commitment. And so on the last couple of slides, we had a few virtual assemblies for our scholars. These are scholar-selected speakers that they got to hear, and advisories. They had a set of speakers to choose from, and so they were able to hear from Jay Rodriguez, Oyatu Shabazz, and Todd Toyoshima over the school year. So we wanted to make sure this is an area we increased celebrations in our cultural heritage months. Our scholars had the opportunity to hear some great speakers to start the day. And then on the next slide, talks about Uplift Hampton, the track and field that we are looking to build at that particular campus, and just shows where we are with fundraising, and we're targeted to complete the project next year in 2023. Any other questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Again, very engaging, and I'm sure that the feedback will be taken into consideration. Layla, I know you popped in. Do you have a report that you're doing?
Absolutely. First of all, I just want to say I'm so glad to be here. I'm just glad to be here. And we have some exciting things to share with you. The School Engagement Committee is only 2 years old. And the School Engagement Committee is only 2 years old. But I think in 2 years, we have been able to do a lot of things. We have been able to put together a mission and a vision. We've been able to think about what it is that the people we serve want, that over what we believe they need. And that has been a particular joy. I've been surrounded with staff and great people on this board and community who are able to help the engagement committee. And this is who we are. We're a committee of volunteers and staff and community members who agreed to come alongside each Uplift school to provide identified critical care and support in these complex times. Why we exist? We exist to provide support and encouragement to scholars, staff, teachers, and administrators. And with that in mind, we set out. Here's what our committees look like. We decided that it would probably be very helpful if we sort of divided ourselves and moved forward to conquer some great things. These are my fabulous committee members, and I certainly want to acknowledge the board members who just did above and beyond. We met probably monthly, and then had subcommittee meetings on top of that. Who does that? But they did, and we were able to accomplish some things. Then we had community members, because you know what? It's not necessarily good to feed on yourself. So we had people from outside of Uplift come in and be a part of it, and that was great. And then our stellar Uplift team that I really just can't say enough about, because you can have great ideas and great ways of doing things, but if you don't have people to help facilitate and execute, you can forget about it. Amanda, Brian, Priscilla, we are forever grateful for your facilitation and execution. So here's some of the things that we're proud of. We set some goals, we set some time objectives, and we went out to meet them. But we didn't do that before we took a survey with our staff and said, what is it that you think would be helpful to you? And it's with that that we went forward. In October, we provided swag gifts for teachers because that's what they said they would like or enjoy. November, December, we presented in-person recognition treats. Now hold on, hold your horses. I know you don't believe it, but we went to every school. Every school. I'm so proud of that because we got to show up as representing you and saying this. We are proud of you. This has been beyond hard what you've been able to accomplish, and we're proud of you. And with each school, not just did we show up with treats, because that's important, and we also showed up with certificates, and we were able to outline specific things relative to that school that they did a great job at. And I'm really proud of that. So our team divided, went to 45 schools, and we were able to gather and say, you're awesome, and here's why. In February, we delivered more swag and teacher and staff gifts. In April, we gifted books to every second grade scholar and added books to their classrooms. That's big. And we even sent some of our scholars home with books. We sent scholars home with books. What a treat to have your very own book. And Uplift did a phenomenal job of making a big deal of the thing that was a big deal, which is owning your own book and encouraging this lean into literacy. Then in May, we delivered more treats and handwritten note cards. Can I say that again? Handwritten note cards. And I say that twice because it mattered that we took time to write and try to really share something that we found to be important, that you have worked time, effort, and energy beyond what we can really provide. But this we can do. We can write postcards to our teachers and our administrators, and that we did, and delivered by our amazing team. So here are some great pictures of swag and the November and December recognitions. And I am just so proud of the committee that I worked with, who just were able to help do all of these things. Look at these great bags. I know you want one. I know you do. These are great bags. And then the thank you and appreciation that went along with it. Mrs. Dipsworth. What a delight and a treat. And we, not only did we have Mrs. Dipsworth, we had other readers come alongside of us and read from some of the books that were selected for our scholars. So long beyond what we presented in the schools was a recording so teachers could then go back later and listen to some of the recordings that were done from these books. And I'm really proud of that. Mrs. Dipsworth, oh, she's special. She is special. If you haven't seen her, you probably need to. But she just professes this love for reading. And she delivers that through her character, Mrs. Dipsworth. And our schools were able to enjoy her. A few of our schools have been able to enjoy her. May was the note cards and the treats. And treats are really a great thing. And then these are some of our scholars reading the books and enjoying the books that we delivered. And just a thank you to our board and the committee for joining, for being a part of this great opportunity. Amanda, have I missed anything? I'd like to invite at this time any of our committee members if they want to share a word or two, not to elongate too much further, but Is there anything you'd like to share about your participation on the engagement committee? Or?
I would just say you're a taskmaster.
Oh. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, so at the end of each committee meeting, we had something that we needed to do, and you needed to do it with gusto because it's really who we are. And so on the count of 3, I'd like for you to join me as we close out this section of my presentation. And it's simply 1, 2, 3, uplift. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, uplift! Okay, y'all might have to work on that. That was an initial effort. Anyway, seriously, team, thank you so much for all that you did to make this wonderful.
Again, thank you, Lel, for that great presentation. And, you know, it was our first time to do that routine, so maybe the next meeting, the meeting after, we can improve on it.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, I'll take it from here.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Richard. So we have one very quick administrative action item. It is procedural in nature. It's pretty straightforward. Every year we have to certify to TEA via board action, so we'll take a vote on this in a second, that all of our scholars are going to have access to the materials that cover all of the state's mandated TEKS, right? All of our TEKS before is the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. It's kind of think of it as kind of the state's required curriculum for us. And because they give us the money to pay for the books, they want to make sure we're getting the right books and materials and et cetera. So the curriculum team went in, they put together a survey. The survey was in the pre-read that went out to everyone. Really what we need is for the board to vote to certify the survey is correct and accurate, and we will get that submitted to the state so we can get all of our materials going for next school year.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve and certify the 2022-2023 allotment and TKS certification form as presented?
So moved. Can I do that?
No, sorry.
John, so
It's a good plug to be on the executive committee team.
Harold, I used to be there, right where you are.
So John, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any votes against the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved by unanimous vote. Do we have a closed session?
We don't have anything for closed session.
Actually, the only other business I was going to mention is this week, there's a lot of stuff going on our testing of our kids. And I guess the next time we get together, but probably in advance of that, there's probably going to be some communication on how our students did, how our scholars did. And so just let you know that that's forthcoming. We'll probably have a more detailed dive at the June meeting, but we'll probably get some communication in advance of that so that you know how our kids have done, particularly relative to last year and or relative to our prior benchmark. So that's all we need to say on that. And the next meeting is June 21st. I believe that's...
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So whatever Tuesday, June 21st, if those two coincide with each other, that's our next meeting. The time is now, is there any other comments? Otherwise, the time is now 6:15, and the board is, meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.